The Whispering Edge station had been dying for 3 years, and Jasper Vale had been dying along with it, not literally, of course, though some days it felt that way. The station's life support system still functioned. The recycled air still filled his lungs, and the protein synthesizers still produced meals that tasted like cardboard wrapped in disappointment. But dying didn't always mean the stopping of a heart. Sometimes it meant the slow erosion of purpose, the gradual acceptance that you'd been left behind by a universe that had moved on without you. Jasper floated through the communications hub, his mag boots clicking softly against the metal floor with each step. The sound echoed in the vast chamber, a lonely rhythm that had become the soundtrack to his existence. Banks of monitors lined the curved walls, most of them dark, a few flickering with static or displaying outdated star charts. This station had once been humanity's pride, a listening post, positioned perfectly to monitor deep space transmissions, to catch the whispers of distant civilizations, to serve as an early warning system for threats unknown. That was before the war, before humanity had reached too far, pushed too hard, and been slapped down by forces they'd never truly understood. The Xanthari Empire had crushed Earth's expansion in less than 2 years, and humanity had limped back to its corner of space like a beaten dog. The Whispering Edge, once crucial, became irrelevant overnight. No one cared about monitoring alien transmissions when those aliens had made it abundantly clear that humanity's place was small, contained, and carefully watched. They'd pulled everyone out. Everyone except Jasper. Someone had to maintain the equipment, they'd said. Someone had to keep the automated systems running, just in case Earth ever needed the station again. It was a job for one person, a quiet job, a forgotten job. Jasper had volunteered. He told himself it was because he believed in duty, in serving humanity even in obscurity. But the truth, the one he rarely admitted even to himself, was simpler and more pathetic. He had nowhere else to go. At 32, Jasper Vale was unremarkable in every conceivable way. Average height, average build, brown hair that couldn't decide if it wanted to be straight or wavy, eyes that were neither quite brown nor quite hazel. He'd never been good at making friends, never been comfortable in crowds. Space suited him, its silence, its vastness, its indifference. Here, his awkwardness didn't matter. Here, there was no one to disappoint. He pulled himself to the main console and began his daily checks. Power levels stable. Life support nominal. Communication arrays functional, but unused. It was always the same. Day after day, month after month, year after year. The universe spun on, and Jasper remained still, a fixed point in the chaos, forgotten. December 23rd. The date glowed on his wrist display, and Jasper felt something twist in his chest. Christmas was in 2 days. Not that it mattered out here. There were no carols drifting through the corridors, no smell of pine or cinnamon, no laughter of family gathering together. Just him, the station, and the infinite dark. He'd been alone for the last 3 Christmases. The first year, he'd tried to celebrate. He'd synthesized something approximating turkey, had played old holiday music through the station's speakers, had even fashioned a small tree from wire and spare parts. It had felt hollow, performative, like an actor rehearsing for an audience that would never arrive. The second year, he'd acknowledged the day with a quiet toast to himself. This year, he planned to let it pass unmarked. The station suddenly shuddered. Jasper's hand shot out to grip the console, steadying himself. His heart kicked into a higher gear. The shudder came again, not violent, but definitely there. Something had made contact with the station's docking area. His fingers flew over the controls, pulling up the external feeds. The docking port camera showed nothing. Empty space, distant stars. But the pressure sensors told a different story. Something small had attached itself to the outer airlock. Something alive. Jasper's mind raced through possibilities. A debris collision? No, the sensors would have detected it earlier. A malfunction? Possible, but unlikely. He'd just serviced that section last week. That left only one explanation, one that made his blood run cold. Someone, or something, had deliberately come to the station. His hand hovered over the emergency beacon. Standard protocol was clear. Any unidentified contact was to be reported immediately. But something stopped him. Curiosity, maybe. Or maybe just the desperate hope that something, anything, would break the monotony of his existence. Jasper pulled up the airlock diagnostics. The outer door had been forced open, not blasted, but pried, as if by someone without proper tools. The inner door remained sealed. Whatever was in the airlock was trapped there, caught between the station and the void. He made his decision quickly, before doubt could sink its claws in. Jasper grabbed his emergency kit and made his way through the winding corridors toward the docking section. The station seemed darker than usual, the shadows deeper. His breathing sounded loud in his ears. The airlock control panel blinked red. Pressure normalized. Atmosphere breathable. Whatever was inside wasn't wearing a suit then. Jasper's finger rested on the door release. This was insane. This could be anything: a trap, a scout, something hostile. His hand was shaking. He pressed the button. The door slid open with a hiss of equalizing pressure. And Jasper found himself staring at a child. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old by human standards, though her species aged differently. Zenthari. He recognized the features from the war. Broadcasts, the luminescent skin that glowed faintly blue-white in the dim light. The large eyes that took up nearly a third of her face. Silver where humans had white, with pupils that were vertical slits. Her hair, if it could be called that, was more like fine crystalline threads that floated around her head, as if suspended in water. She was huddled in the corner of the airlock, her arms wrapped around her knees. And she was crying. The sound was what struck him most, not alien at all, but heartbreakingly universal. The soft hiccuping sobs of a frightened child, the kind of crying that came from deep terror and absolute helplessness. Her small body shook with each breath, and as Jasper's eyes adjusted, he saw the dark stains spreading across her side. Blood. She was injured. Their eyes met. The girl's crying stopped abruptly, choked off by fear. She pressed herself harder against the wall, trying to make herself smaller, invisible. Her mouth opened, and a sound came out, not words, but a high-pitched keening that made Jasper's teeth ache. It was a sound of pure terror. "Wait," Jasper said, holding up his hands. "Wait, I'm not." She flinched as if he'd struck her, and Jasper's heart broke a little. What had happened to her? How had she ended up here, alone and bleeding in an abandoned human station? And why did she look at him like he was a monster? Because to her, he probably was. Humans and Zenthari had been at war. Her people had won, had driven his people back, but war left scars on both sides. She was a child, but she'd grown up in the aftermath of that conflict. She'd probably been taught that humans were dangerous, cruel, not to be trusted. Jasper slowly lowered himself to the ground, making himself smaller, less threatening. He kept his hands visible, his movements slow and deliberate. "It's okay," he said softly, knowing she probably couldn't understand his words, but hoping his tone would carry meaning. "You're safe here. I'm not going to hurt you." The girl watched him with those enormous silver eyes, pupils dilated with fear. She didn't move, didn't make a sound. Jasper could see her chest rising and falling rapidly, too rapidly. She was going into shock. The blood on her side was spreading. Whatever had happened to her, she needed help soon. Jasper reached slowly for his emergency kit, moving at a glacial pace. The girl's eyes tracked every motion, her body tensed to flee, even though there was nowhere to run. "I have medical supplies," Jasper said gently. "I can help with that wound." Will you let me? He pantomimed bandaging, hoping the gesture would translate. The girl remained frozen, a statue of terror. Minutes passed. Jasper didn't move, didn't push. He just sat there, a few feet away, letting her see that he wasn't attacking, wasn't advancing, wasn't doing anything threatening. Slowly, incrementally, he saw something shift in her eyes. The raw panic ebbed slightly, replaced by confusion. He wasn't acting like the monster she expected. He was just sitting there, waiting. Patient. Jasper had all the time in the world. For 3 years, time had been his only companion. He could wait, and so he did, sitting cross-legged on the cold floor of the airlock. His medical kit open beside him, while a Xanthari child watched him with fearful eyes, and Christmas approached in the silent dark of space, neither of them knowing that in the shadows beyond the station, scanners were watching, recording everything, and that the fate of 2 species might rest on what happened next in this small, forgotten corner of the universe. The standoff lasted 23 minutes. Jasper knew because he'd been watching the chrono display on his wrist, using it as an anchor to keep himself calm and still. 23 minutes of sitting on the cold metal floor while a terrified child watched him like a cornered animal. His legs had gone numb 5 minutes ago, pins and needles dancing up his calves, but he didn't shift position. Any sudden movement might shatter this fragile moment. The girl's breathing had finally slowed. Not calm, not yet, but no longer the rapid panicked gasps of before. Her eyes still tracked his every micro-movement, but the keen edge of terror had dulled slightly. She was thinking now, evaluating, trying to understand why the human wasn't doing what she'd been taught humans would do. The blood on her side had stopped spreading, but the stain was large enough to make Jasper's stomach clench. How long had she been injured? How had she even gotten here? The nearest Xanthari territory was weeks away at sublight speeds. Unless she'd been on a ship that had come close. But why would Xanthari ships come anywhere near the Whispering Edge? "I'm Jasper," he said softly, touching his chest. His voice echoed slightly in the small space. "Jasper." He repeated the gesture, hoping she'd understand. The girl's head tilted slightly, a movement so small he almost missed it. Her crystalline hair caught the light, throwing tiny rainbows across the walls. For a moment, she looked like something from a fairy tale, ethereal, magical, impossible. Then she winced, her hand moving instinctively to her injured side, and the spell broke. She was just a hurt child, far from home. Jasper pointed to the medical kit, then to her wound, then made a gentle wrapping motion. "Help?" he said, making it a question. "Let me help?" The girl's eyes moved from his face to the kit and back again. He could see the war happening behind those silver eyes, fear versus pain, instinct versus need. Slowly, so slowly it was almost imperceptible, she nodded. Relief flooded through Jasper like warm water. "Okay," he breathed. "Okay, I'm going to come a little closer. Just a little." He shifted forward on his knees, moving inches at a time, giving her every opportunity to change her mind. She didn't bolt. Her body remained tense, coiled like a spring, but she stayed. When he was close enough to reach out and touch her, he stopped again. "I need to look at your side," he said gently. "Is that okay?" She didn't nod this time, but she didn't pull away when he reached toward her. His hands moved with exaggerated care, like he was approaching a wild bird. Her skin was warm under his fingertips, warmer than human skin, and it tingled slightly against his palm, some kind of bioelectric field, maybe. The sensation was strange, but not unpleasant. The wound beneath the torn fabric of her clothing was a jagged cut, deep but clean. A fall, maybe, or a sharp piece of metal. Not a weapon wound. That was something, at least. Jasper opened the medical kit and pulled out antiseptic and bandaging. His supplies were human-made, designed for human biology, but the basics were universal. Clean the wound, stop the bleeding, prevent infection. This might sting, he warned, though he knew she didn't understand the words. He hoped his tone carried the message. The girl's entire body went rigid when the antiseptic touched her skin. A sharp hiss escaped her throat, and Jasper froze, ready to pull back. But she didn't pull away. Her small hands gripped her knees so tightly, her knuckles, or whatever, the Xanthari equivalent, was turned a lighter shade of blue. Tears leaked from the corners of her eyes, but she held still. "Brave," Jasper murmured. "You're so brave." He worked quickly after that, cleaning and bandaging with practiced efficiency. His hands had steadied, falling into the familiar rhythm of tending wounds. In another life, he'd wanted to be a medic. He'd washed out of the training program. Too slow under pressure, they'd said, too hesitant in crisis situations. But here, now, with no one to judge him, his hands knew what to do. When he finished, the girl's side was wrapped in clean white bandages. The bleeding had stopped. Jasper sat back, giving her space again. "There," he said. "All done." The girl looked down at the bandages, then back up at him. Something had changed in her expression. The terror had receded further, replaced by confusion and a tentative, fragile curiosity. She made a sound, not the keening from before, but something softer, questioning. Jasper smiled despite himself. "I don't know what you're saying, but you're welcome." She reached out one hand, hesitant, and touched the bandages gently. Then she looked at Jasper again, and this time there was something almost like gratitude in those alien eyes. His wrist display blinked. 1,800 hours. The station's climate control would start its nighttime cycle soon, dropping the temperature to conserve power. The airlock was already cold. He could see his breath misting slightly. For him, it was uncomfortable. For her, he remembered the briefings from the war. Xanthari were warm climate beings. They needed higher temperatures to maintain their metabolic processes. Too much cold, and they went into a kind of hibernation, their systems shutting down to preserve energy. If she stayed here overnight, she might not wake up. "Come on," Jasper said, standing slowly. He offered his hand. "You can't stay here. It's going to get too cold." The girl stared at his outstretched hand, like it might bite her. Jasper waited, patient again. Finally, moving as if in a dream, she placed her small hand in his. Her touch was electric, literally. A small jolt ran up his arm, making him gasp. She pulled back immediately, fear flooding back into her face, but Jasper held on gently. "It's okay," he said quickly. "Just surprised me." "It's okay." He helped her stand, and she swayed immediately. Jasper caught her, one arm around her small shoulders, and felt how light she was. Too light. When had she last eaten? He guided her carefully out of the airlock and into the station proper. The corridors felt different with another person in them. Less empty. Less dead. The girl looked around with wide eyes, taking in the human architecture, the angular design so different from the flowing organic shapes of Xanthari construction. Every few steps she'd stumble, and Jasper would steady her, murmuring encouragement. He brought her to the living quarters, his quarters, the only section of the station he kept fully powered and warm. It wasn't much. A sleeping alcove, a small desk covered in half-read books and repair manuals, a porthole that looked out at the stars. But it was warm, and right now, that was what mattered. The girl immediately gravitated toward the heat vent, pressing herself against the wall where warm air flowed. Her skin began to glow a little brighter, and Jasper realized it had been dimming before. She'd been getting dangerously cold. "Stay here," he said, gesturing for her to remain. "I'll get you some food." In the tiny galley, Jasper stared at the protein synthesizer with dismay. Everything in its database was human food proteins and nutrients calibrated for human digestion. Would any of it work for Xanthari biology? He had no idea. In the end, he programmed it for the blandest, simplest option, a nutrient paste that was mostly carbohydrates and simple proteins. If she could eat anything he could make, it would be that dot when he returned. The girl was standing at the porthole, staring out at the stars. The light from distant suns reflected in her eyes, turning them into mirrors of the cosmos. She looked so small against the vastness of space, a tiny figure silhouetted against infinity. "Here," Jasper said softly, not wanting to startle her. He held out the bowl of paste. She turned, saw the food, and hesitated. Then her stomach made a sound of gurgling that was recognizable in any language. Hunger. She took the bowl with both hands and sniffed it cautiously. Her nose wrinkled apparently. Xanthari found human food as unappetizing as humans found theirs. But she was hungry enough not to care. She ate with the desperate intensity of someone who hadn't had a meal in far too long. Jasper watched her, his mind spinning with questions he couldn't ask. Where had she come from? Why was she alone? Were there others looking for her? That last thought sent a chill through him. If there were Xanthari ships searching for a missing child, and they found her here with a human, the war might have ended 3 years ago, but the animosity hadn't died with it. Humans were barely tolerated in their small corner of space, watched constantly, restricted heavily. If Xanthari authorities found one of their children with a human, they wouldn't ask questions first. They'd assume the worst. Jasper should call it in. Should report this to Earth Command, let them handle it diplomatically. It was the smart thing to do, the safe thing. Instead, he found himself pulling out a spare blanket and draping it around the girl's shoulders. She looked up at him, surprised, then pulled the blanket tighter. Her eyes were already drooping. The food, the warmth, the relative safety, it was all catching up with her. She was crashing. "You can sleep here," Jasper said, gesturing to his sleeping alcove. I'll figure something out." But the girl didn't go to the bed. Instead, she sank down right where she was, curling up against the heat vent, the blanket wrapped around her like a cocoon. Within minutes, her breathing had deepened into sleep. Jasper stood there, looking down at her, wondering what he'd gotten himself into. He should feel worried, anxious about the consequences. Instead, he felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 years: purpose. For the first time since he'd been left on this dying station, something needed him. Someone needed him. He moved quietly to his desk and sat down, intending to keep watch. Through the porthole, the stars wheeled slowly in their eternal dance. Somewhere out there, beyond his sight, Jasper couldn't know that a vast ship drifted in the darkness. Couldn't know that inside that ship, an empress watched the feed from hidden sensors planted throughout the station. Couldn't know that Thera, ruler of the Xanthari Empire, had been watching her daughter for hours, her heart caught between duty and something dangerously close to hope. The girl Nira, daughter of Thyra, heir to an empire, slept peacefully for the first time in 3 days, wrapped in a human blanket, in a human station, protected by a human who had every reason to hate her kind Dot and Jasper Vale, unremarkable and forgotten. Sat guard over a sleeping alien child while Christmas lights twinkled in his memory, not knowing that his simple acts of kindness were being recorded, analyzed, and treasured by someone who had the power to change everything down outside. The void pressed close, infinite and cold. But inside the Whispering Edge station, in one small room, warmth bloomed like a flower in winter. The night cycle crept on, and 2 beings from warring species shared a space and peace, while destiny held its breath and waited to see what morning would bring.